Once, in a kingdom called the Lane, there was a king with 2 sons. The Lane was a very old kingdom, and it had hundreds of kings, perhaps even thousands. When time goes on long enough, not even historians can remember everything. The Eyes of the Dragon is a very curious entry on Stephen King's bibliography, as it is nothing like what he had done before, or that he ever did again. A high fantasy book. Because yes, The Dark Tower is considered fantasy by some, but it's also a bit of a western and it still has the horror that King has made his niche, so not quite high fantasy. But The Eyes of the Dragon, while having some really horrifying scenes, is not that. It's a story about kings, princes, evil wizards, and yes, a dragon. And well, the evil wizard is an old, not quite friend. Let's call him an old acquaintance of us constant readers. And there are a couple of scenes that will make the hairs in your arms stand up. There is nothing that can be called horror in this book. In fact, it's the kind of book that I would recommend to non-horror readers because that's exactly why King wrote it. He wrote it for his daughter Naomi, who has never been a fan of her father's normal work. Unfortunately, that is also the reason why it's a bit of a footnote in King's works, because besides of the tie it to the Dark Tower universe lists, people tend to forget it exists, which is a pity because it is very good and far better than a couple of books that are going to appear later in our list. But I am getting a bit ahead of myself here. Of course, there is no movie adaptation, and there will probably never be one, which is a pity. I think we will see a Talisman adaptation before we ever get to see An Eyes of the Dragon. Actually, I think we will see every single one of his really short stories adapted before we ever see someone talking about adapting the Eyes of the Dragon. But it is a wonderful tale, and we will see more about it pretty soon. And I'll put it on the darker scale of, say, The Princess Bride. Yes, I went there. If you like The Princess Bride for the character and the smart use of everything around them, yes, Kat, I am talking about that scene, you will probably like The Eyes of the Dragon, even if there is definitely no kissing in this book. And things are far, far darker than they ever were in the Kingdom of Gilder, even if I think Humperdinck and the Six-Fingered Man would have loved to meet the king's advisor. I'm AdalisaZ, and today I'm going to take you to a secret passage within the walls of an old castle. It's a bit dark, but I promise, no bats here. Just be silent, because we don't want anyone to hear us as we will open a tiny panel behind the bricks and get to see this royal drama unfold through the eyes of the dragon. Now, I know you're wondering, why King decided to branch out so far away from his usual toolbox to write a fairy tale of all things? Well, the reason is a sweet one as far as word of mouth goes. See, while Owen and Joe seem to have inherited his love for all things creepy, his daughter Naomi did not. And one day she told him that, wouldn't it be nice if you could write a book for children like me? And well, King is a dad, and he'd do anything for his kids, and here we are. Yes, Hei Hei. However, I will be honest. While not many constant readers will agree with my reasoning, I think Mr. King did not stray that far away from his usual writing. Because, you see, fantasy books, with all of their beautiful... Can I continue, Hei Hei? Yes, I know. With all of their beautiful world building and magic around, are always centered around the characters who are going on a quest. If we didn't care about... Yes, we do care. About Frodo and his life in the Shire, We wouldn't care if he finished or not his quest to destroy the One Ring. On the other hand, horror is usually about the situation that the characters find themselves in. We don't really care about the doomed group of explorers who will go on to face Cthulhu, partly because we know that they will all die horribly, partly because we want to see them die horribly. King's stories, no matter how complicated they might get, hing on the characters, and The Eyes of the Dragon is not an exception. It is also the book I'd recommend for anyone who wants to start with the Dark Tower universe. Yes, not The Stand, where we meet one of the Dark Tower's main characters, or even The Talisman that sort of introduces the setting of the multiple worlds that we will see later. Not even The Gunslinger, because I have to be honest, as much as I love the Dark Tower, the first book is the hardest to get into at first. But The Eyes of the Dragon is short, a quite easy read with a very intriguing plot, and it reintroduces that main character I mentioned before, a name we will learn to fear, trust me, as well as his modus operandi and his plans for all the worlds connected to the multiverse. And yet, it is also a book that stands alone quite well. So if you end up deciding that you don't want to swim into the deeper end of the pool, you still end up satisfied. So what is this unique fairy tale about? Yep, you guessed it, spoilers from this point on. So if you don't want anything spoiled, go to your nearest bookstore, either physical or digital, and get it, because it's a good read. King Roland of the Lane is old, quite old, but he has two young sons. Elder son Peter, who is 16 and beloved by everyone, and younger son Thomas, 10, who is there. Everyone in the kingdom likes Roland, but they are quite honestly waiting for him to die so that Peter can inherit the crown, because while Roland is not that bad of a monarch, his most trusted advisor, court magician Flag, well, he's a completely different story. And everyone knows that once Peter rises to the throne, Flag will be gone. Flag, in particular, is quite aware of this and not ready to let go of his power. So when the unthinkable happens and Roland is murdered, it is a surprise to everyone that all evidence points to Peter himself. While as a royal he can't be executed for his crime, the young prince is sent to the Needle, the most secure solitary prison in the realm, to live out his remaining years. At the same time, Thomas, weak, easily influenceable Thomas, is crowned king. And who is there to advise a poor kid who has just lost his whole family? Well, trusted court wizard Flag, of course! There are ways in which The Eyes of the Dragon is a very different read from the usual king, but this is mostly on the style he uses to tell the story, not on the story itself. This time, he's telling us the story, and we are very aware that he's the narrator, and as such, not a person who lived through it, but a historian who is telling it to us. There are pauses where he accidentally spoils us a future development, a tick he has had all the way since Salem's Lot, if we are honest about it, or leaves some plots dangling. He even admits at some points that a better narrator than he would tell the story differently, but the most noticeable thing in the storytelling is that he constantly let us decide if something was good or bad for the outcome, not making a definite judgment, except, you see, on how to judge Thomas, the younger brother. When we're introduced to Peter, he is the perfect little prince. Smart, wise beyond his years, athletic, handsome, born out of the only time his parents had sex without any magic potion created by Flag, and maybe aided by the fact that his father had just eaten a dragon's heart, the last dragon of the kingdom, and the one that gives the book its title, even if it's a posthumous title for Niner, the dragon. Charismatic, good-willed, popular, and loved by everyone. Peter just has to become king in the minds of every inhabitant of the lane. Why, he even saved a horse with a broken leg from being killed, and his best friend in all the world is a young noble whose family fell so much from fortune that they are lower than most peasants. That is how amazing Peter is. He is one song and one animal sidekick away from Disney princess status. In fact, Peter only has one flaw, and it's not even much of one. He's not the best archer in the route, and that's it. Other than that, Peter is literally perfect. He'd be Mary Poppins if he could use an umbrella to fly. And he's only 16 when a flag decides that he has to get rid of him immediately, or he won't have the chance to make sure he doesn't interfere with his plans. Thomas, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. A little dull, a little slow, incredibly jealous of his older brother, whose mere existence has doomed Thomas to always be second best in everyone's eyes. Not precisely attractive, in fact, he's very much his father image, and born out of a night where Roland had a bigger dose of an aphrodisiac made by Flag, in which it's pretty much implied that under that influence, he raped his wife. Oh, and just as Roland, very fond of wine and beer despite being only 10 when he ascends to the throne. Where Peter is kind, Thomas is cruel. At one point, he kills a stray dog by stunning him to death while thinking that of course Peter would have never done that, and yes, he feels horrible afterwards, but he still does it. The only thing where Thomas is better than his brother is at archery, and it seems that no one is willing to give Thomas the time of the day. It's a very classic fairy tale trope, the good brother and the bad brother, and King even gives us a magic supernatural explanation as to why they are so different, the circumstances behind their conceptions. And yet, every single opportunity he has, the narrator insists that we should not hate Thomas, that we should not believe Thomas is evil, that we should remember that he was very, very young and very lonely, that he may not have been good with a capital G, but that didn't make him necessarily bad. Because yes, their natures, their basic natures, are a bit different. But their education, the way in which they were raised, that's different too. And in that, neither had a real choice. And we can pretty much tell that no matter how crooked one's genes may be, it's how a child is raised what makes things different in the lane. Before Peter is born, we are introduced to his mother, the beautiful and wise Sasha. She's far, far younger than Roland, but like most royal marriages, she loves her husband, even if they meet quite literally in their wedding day. Ironically, she was one of the candidates for queen selected by Flag himself, looking for a young, shy noblewoman who wouldn't be on the way of his plans for the lane. And while Sasha was young and a noblewoman, she was nothing near shy when it came to things that really mattered. Before she had Peter, she only suggested a couple of changes that vexed Flag. Keeping taxes low, not killing some political enemies, and things like that. Flag hated her and wanted to kill her, but knew deep down that if he did, Roland wouldn't rest until he found the killer, so he waited. And here I make a pause to say, Randall Flagg actually feared Roland, which made Roland let's say, stealth badass. Anyway, Peter was born, and then the trouble doubled for the evil wizard, because Sasha took great care to raise Peter for the 6 years they had together. While the narrator tells us that manners in the lane were less than stellar, Sasha made sure that Peter knew to always use his napkins while eating, that he would know good from bad, that he never would disrespect a worker, a peasant, no matter how low on the ladder they were. Sasha knew her son would be king, and she was determined to make sure that he was fair and good. This is beautifully showcased when she shows Peter that the word God backwards is dog, and reminds him that that's the dual nature of man, not good and evil, but thinking and instinctive, and reminds him at 6 years old that he should always think first. However, Thomas doesn't get a chance. By the time Sasha is pregnant with him, Flag is absolutely done with her and her interference that keeps his plans to destroy the lane stalled. And so he arranges for her to die in childbirth, so that no one will suspect foul play. And so Thomas is not only robbed of the chance to be raised by his mother, he also gets a horrible situation where A. his father leaves his raising to tutor and nannies, B. everyone talks about him as the spare, C. while Roland tries very hard to keep his favoritism a secret, he's unable to, and D. to make matter worse, he is completely unable to see that the wizard who starts offering him friendship around his 7th birthday has less than his best interest in mind. Thomas was dealt a losing hand from the beginning. In short, Peter got raised well by Sasha, while Thomas got raised lonely by Flag. Notice how I say lonely, not bad, because again, the book narrator insists over and over that Thomas is not a bad boy. He's someone who did bad things. The stunning of the dog is the biggest example, and the only one where Thomas was bad out of his own initiative, rather than being influenced by Flag directly. But not someone who is bad deep down. When things come to the last possible moment, Thomas' genes, the good from Sasha, the good from Roland, are more powerful than Flag lies, even when Thomas also knows that he can fall down the bad path if he lets himself. And then there's Flag. Flag is a name that most constant readers of King know to fear, much like people from the lake do, and for similar reasons. He was, in the stand, presented as the embodiment of all evil, a man whose mere presence seemed to create conflict, who was ready to destroy what was left of the world. And while here he only goes by Flag, not using the first name, it's hard to argue that he's not the same man, especially when the narrator tells us that he's immortal and that when he's not in the lane, to avoid people knowing how old he really is, he travels to other worlds. There is no good in Flag. I am not going to delve deep into him and his role in the multiverse of the Tower here, but here's the clearest example we have in King's whole work of born evil because he wasn't raised. Every time he wakes up, he's an adult, and he is ready to create as much chaos and destruction as he can. And sure, then we could say that in King's world, nature beats nurture. After all, Thomas didn't fall completely under Flag's spell because of his genes. But the thing is, we go back to God and Dog. The real answer is that it's not that simple. Thomas had an evil seed in his soul from birth, by no fault of his own, as he was conceived with the help of bad magic. But that didn't define him. It made making the right choices harder, especially when he didn't know what the right choice was in the first place. And Peter, well, as far as he knows, he was perfect. But we're seeing the story from a place where the comparison is, well, absolute evil. And against absolute evil, anything else is good, or at least good enough. So in the end, the answer is the same as the narrator tells us at some points when wondering if things would have been different had the character sigged instead of sacked. We must make our own decisions. It's never as clear as black and white. It's never, well, they were born evil, or well, they were raised evil. There is always a little bit more to dig into. Unless you are a constant reader, you probably hadn't heard about the Eyes of Dragons before, because it is one of King's less known works. But it's a wonderful read and one that I recommend even to those who dislike horrors, because it's exactly what Naomi King had asked for. A story for children, completely different from what we are used to get from the King. Yes, it has her bad flag, and coming after it does feel a bit familiar, but it's still something unexpected. I gave you guys a couple of spoilers here, but trust me, when it comes to the Eyes of the Dragon, the road to the conclusion is far, far more interesting than the conclusion itself. Hey, I never even told you why the novel is titled this way, and trust me, you want to know. Also, the origin of the original title that was The Napkins. It's important. So, again, get to your closest used bookstore or library and check it out. Okay, yes, you can also buy it new, but I have a deep love for used books that deserve a new home. I want to thank my dear patrons, Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, and Jessica, as well as my first supporter, Tanya Pineda, and Amy Song, who is the best person in the universe, and without whom these videos would not exist. Also to my cat's bestie, Sanya, who sent us 2 coffees worth at coffee and thus won herself 2 mentions. She's an adorable kitty, and her owner, Melissa Gibo, is also amazing. I also want to remind you that if you want to support these and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/AdalisaZ with a link on description, as I know my name can be hard to spell. And with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos, as well as to get access to them and a ton of art before anyone else. Or, if you prefer a one-off offer, a coffee with just 1 donation of 3 USD will get you a mention in the next video I make. If you can't support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to the channel, comments so that the algorithm catches engagement, and of course, you sharing the links. I will also welcome all your questions, feedbacks, and suggestions in the comments below. And I hope to see you here next time, when we will be at the mercy of our #1 fan, as we learn that misery loves company.